Welcome back to Dragon Dreams. Have you ever had the situation in which you came up with this amazing story arc for your long-term campaign, only to find that it didn't go the way you thought? This video is for you. Stay tuned. So this video, first of all, is the fourth installment of my things I learned from running BECMI. But it's not BECMI specific. It is for all GMs who are running any campaign more than just a single adventure or just a couple of adventures. And I will have, however, some basic D&D and Mystara references for all of you BECMI enthusiasts out there, or Mystara enthusiasts, or whatever. So, without further ado, let me get into it, except for just one more proviso, which is the purpose of this video is not to say don't do story arcs because they're bad. It's merely to point out some of the problems with story arcs so that you either can decide not to have one or so that you can have a better one. I may do a follow-up video on good things about story arcs, so stay tuned for that, and please take that into account in the comments. I don't want to hear comments from people that just say, there's good reasons to have story arcs, you're wrong, because I'm not actually saying that. All right, let's go. So let me tell you a little bit about the campaign that I designed going in. I knew that I wanted to start with the introductory module B1, In Search of the Unknown. Now, this is a classic module from the old days. And module as written, it's this secret base of these two adventurers, Rogan and Zelagar. And there's this one little bit where we find out that Rogan has a mistress named Melissa. Okay. And I thought, first of all, I want to make a few tweaks to this. Like, what if Rogan is actually married to Melissa and Melissa's actually the third character in this kind of like adventuring party that owned this base long ago? All right. And the other thing is I wanted this to be incorporated into the setting, which was Mystara. And I wanted it to be something that that also I wanted Rogan and Zelagar and Melissa to kind of be the bad guys. All right, because they're written as kind of sinister, nasty dudes in the first place, so it felt like that kind of made sense. So let me tell you how I approached doing this. So let me explain how I anchored this adventure into the setting, because that's a good thing. You should do that. All right. So in the Mystara setting, the starting zone that a lot of people use, including me, is a country called Karamikis. And the history of Karamikis is that over 100 years ago, it was a bunch of different kingdoms that were called the Traladaran kingdoms, or the kingdoms of the Traladaran people. Okay. And then 100 years ago, it was invaded by the Thracian Empire, which conquered it and made all of the Traladaran kingdoms part of this new province of the empire called Traladera. Then, 30 years ago, there was this duke who was a Thracian noble who actually bought the entire province and the right to rule it completely independently from the Emperor of Theatis. And this duke was named Stephen Karameikis. So he called his new Grand Duchy the Grand Duchy of Karameikis. All right. So, how did I incorporate this adventure into that setting? So, we have this underground base, right, in Search of the Unknown, which is sort of a funhouse dungeon. There's lots of cool stuff there. But the basic story is that there's Rogan and Zeligar. Rogan is a fighter, Zeligar is a wizard. I had added the concept that Rogan and Melissa are actually married. So what I did to anchor it in the setting is I decided that these were actually Traladaran nobles, that Zeligar was the court wizard of this old kingdom, and that Rogan was the king, and Melissa was the queen. And so they were actually fighting the Thaiatian invasion when they invaded, okay? But they also kind of turned evil at that point. They basically threw up their hands and went, we're throwing goodness out the window. We're just going to hire like orcs and ogres and, were-rats and stuff to fight the Thaiatians. And we don't care, who dies in this process. They basically became really nasty dudes. And so this is, you're exploring their hidden hideout. All right. And so far, all I've done is anchor this in the setting, which is exactly the right thing to do. Okay. And I knew that an adventure like this shouldn't be thought too far in advance. So another good thing that I did is I kind of went, okay, that's my prep. We'll see what the PCs do with this. So I came up with another idea, which is that Zeligar, in his library, you can find notes that he is researching how to turn himself, Rogan, and Melissa into undead. Now, that is a hook for future adventures. That's a good thing to do. So that's why I did it. I had no intention of having them actually show up, because undead are extremely powerful and brutal in BECMI. They can level drain you and stuff if they're powerful enough, which these guys certainly, are going to be beyond just your zombies and skeleton and ghoul type undead, right? These are maybe more like vampires or something. So I wasn't going to have them fight these guys immediately. It was just kind of a hook out there that maybe they're still out there. Woo. Okay. And that was my starting point. And from there, I started the campaign. All right. So the campaign started really well. All right. The players went through the initial dungeon. And then I was going, okay, what do we do next? And my initial thought was it would be really fun to do Keep on the Borderlands, which I ended up doing. The party was maybe second level. I think maybe the thief was third level or something, because they level up faster in BECMI. But, it was right at a good time to switch to another, first to third level rated adventure, and Keep on the Borderlands is another classic. And so that's when I kind of may have taken a wrong turn, because rather than just going, it's a new day, it's a new adventure, it's a new episode, I came up with this idea of what if this thing with Rogan and Melissa and Zeligar is the wraparound story. So what if there's this connection where they're still out there pulling the strings, and instead of the Cult of Chaos, if you know that adventure, there's the Cult of the Moon Dragon, which was the cult that Melissa and Zeligar belonged to. And so I made this connection between the two adventures. And As the campaign went on, after they got done with Keep on the Borderlands, I kind of thought, what can I do now? And I came up with this concept that they have to find, the PCs that is, have to find the 4 dragon stones of chaotic dragons, because like Rogan, Melissa, and Zeligar are still out there, and there's this way that they can summon these 4 chaotic dragons to serve them if they get a hold of the dragon stones. So they went on this quest to try to get the dragon stones before the Rogan and Melissa and Zeligar's adventuring party that they had hired, these barbarians, got them. And there's all this, butting heads with the rival adventuring party. And when they were at higher levels, Zeligar starts sending invisible stalkers after them and things like that. And it was really fun. And then my concept was that you get to the final showdown with them. And there are some problems with that story arc. Sounds cool, right? But stay tuned. Briefly, let me tell you where I placed the dragon stones, because it allowed me to string 5 more classic adventures from the old days into this campaign. So I had the Stone of Black Dragons was on the Isle of Dread, the famous Isle of Dread adventure X1. The Amber Dragonstone was, of course, in Castle Amber. Where else? Module X2, which is this magical French chateau. And the third one was X3, Curse of Xanathon. So it was in the Duchy of Runa, where that module takes place. And the fourth one was owned by the Master of the Desert Nomads in modules X4 and X5. All right. And it was great fun running through those classic modules. But there was just one problem. The problem was that I had tremendous player turnover. Now, this is not uncommon with VTTs. I was running this over Roll20. In the old days, I might have almost certainly actually been running it for a stable group of characters and players. And so therefore they would have known about the setup of all of this, and it might have gone better. So let me give you a sense of the type of player turnover we had. So I think several people left by the end of the Keep on the Borderlands. We had some people stay through the next few adventures, but we also picked up some new people. And then, people, like somebody else left, or somebody had to take a hiatus because of work or something like that. So we kind of had some players who had been there since the beginning, but I think by the end of the campaign, there was actually only one player who was actually there from the beginning. All right. So given all that turnover, I finally got through Module X5, the second of the Desert Nomads series. And there's this message from, the Duchy of Karamikas calling them back and saying, Rogan, Melissa, and Zeligar are waging open war against Karamikas. Come fight the final battle with them. And one of, my newest player was kind of like, wait, what? Now, I did a lot to make sure that every single player got really connected with the campaign story arc. So unless you're thinking, well, gee, Ivan, of course they didn't know because, there were new players. No, I did a lot. I did a ton to educate every single one of the players about the setting without overwhelming them and giving them a long, boring history lesson. So it's like they'd come in and I'd be like, okay, you're from Karamikas. There's this evil army led by these undead guys from the past named Rogan, Melissa, and Zelagar. There are these heroes who are searching for the dragon stones that you've heard of, that, like Rogan, Melissa, and Zelagar are trying to collect these in order to raise these chaotic dragons. I'd give them that. I'd make write-ups in Word documents. I'd put that on the Discord server for people to read. I had this really cool thing I did that I'm very proud of called the previously on video. You know how in TV shows there's a previously on blah, blah, blah. I did one of those where it'd be like, previously on my campaign, there's like, this is what's going on. So that people, every single adventure, every single session, everybody would get the short, like few minutes summary of the story arc. And that way they would get this sense of it. And it even had like pictures of like maps of the Isle of Dread and Chateau d'Amberville and all that kind of stuff, so that they would kind of get clued in a very short and fun way. I thought it was really engaging, and they really loved it. So what went wrong? My players are great. I really like my players. They're really smart. So I think there's something about how I set this whole thing up. There's something fundamentally wrong about how I handled the story arc that made this disconnect. I think the mistake I made was I was thinking of my campaign as kind of like a movie, maybe as like a trilogy, like the Star Wars trilogy, but not so much as like a TV show, despite the fact that I had these previously on videos. I was thinking of it, in other words, as this one plot that went from level 1 with brand new characters all the way through, I think people were like level 7 or 8 by the end. And the issue, I think, was that like I tried to have this grand narrative. And the problem is that having players come and go meant that they're not really grokking the grand narrative. They're trying to. They probably did their best. But it's like, if you didn't experience it, there's a sense to which it kind of didn't happen. I know when I've come into campaigns mid-campaign, even though people tried to help me out and the GM was really good about it, I kind of didn't really get it. There's just something about that situation that's difficult. All right. So I think that one thing that would have been better is if I had treated the separate adventure modules as being kind of like separate episodes in a TV show that don't need to be related or as related. But stay tuned. Here's how I might do things in the future. Rather than either a huge overarching story arc or a bunch of completely disconnected adventures, what I might have is each adventure has in it the seed or kind of a hint or something of the next one. Okay, so I could have made it so that it's like you do In Search of the Unknown with Quascatan, the secret base of Melissa, Rogan, and Zelagar. They explore that, and there's references to like the cult of the Moon Dragon, which I mentioned before, was this cult that they're members of, and how there's like plans to, I don't know, like invade Karamikas from this place called the Caves of Chaos or something like that. And then I'm just kind of spitballing here. Like, this doesn't have to be the exact thing you'd use. You might massage this a little bit, but then have it be like, okay, so then they go to Keep on the Borderlands to find out if there's a threat to the northern border. They find out, yes, there is. There's like all these various different disparate humanoid tribes that are living in the Caves of Chaos. They're all serving the cult of the Moon Dragon that's all getting ready for an invasion. and then like they solve that problem, right? And then they go on to the next one. So maybe it's like, I don't know, like in that case of chaos, there's some sort of thing where, like the cult of the moon dragon is like, oh yeah, um we have this, we need funds if we're going to, really be successful in our invasion. And we've listed various places where, you might find some funds. And one of them is there's a black pearl on the Isle of Dread that we want to find. And we found a map to it, right? And so like they get that. And then, like they go to the Isle of Dread, and then like, in the course of doing the Isle of Dread, then, they find some sort of thing about why they'd want to go to Chateau d'Amberville in X2, Castle Amber, etc. Right? Like I think you get the point. So that there's this sense of it being kind of this living world. And if the players stay around for the whole campaign, some of them may become interested in some of the ongoing themes. So some of them might, so if they become interested in stuff, like do that, right? Like if they're really interested in investigating the cult of the moon dragon, then go, okay, cool, like let's do cult of the moon dragon stuff. Or if they become really interested in finding out whatever happened to Rogue and Melissa and Delagar, like have a quest to find, like the lost history there. Of course, it would culminate in fighting these undead monsters or something. And, like just kind of make it this, what you want to do, I think, is to make the campaigns connect one to the other so that the world feels like this real living place without having a story arc that every single player needs to know. That, I think, is the cure for what I was trying to do. Now, I just want to be clear. I'm not trying to say, I had trouble running a D&D game and I need advice. I mean, I'm a seasoned GM. I started playing in 82 all the way through 2000. I had a hiatus from 2000 to 2020, but I've been playing solidly since 2020. And I know what I'm doing. I want, though, to always learn and get better at my craft. And I want to share what I'm learning so that you guys can do better and so that we can help each other. All right? So tell me what you think in the comments. As always, please be polite. And until next time, happy dreaming, everybody.